Hey everybody, it's Mr. Smedes and welcome to another installment of FRQ Fridays. In today's video, we're going to be going over and scoring practice FRQ number 4. Now if you want to see the video where I annotate this FRQ, check out the suggested video up in the corner, write this practice FRQ, then come back to this video so you can score it. Now the submissions have started to trickle back in after Christmas break, so this week we have submissions from Aiden, of course, Mira, Kimberly, Destiny, Phelan, an anonymous ape scholar, and we also want to give a shout out in today's video to Mrs. Faust's ape scholars from JL Man Academy. Thanks for watching the channel and writing like scholars. Now the FRQ that we're scoring in today's video comes from an anonymous ape scholar, so let's check out their answers and see how they did. As always, the scoring guide for this FRQ is in the video description down below, or you can just follow along on screen as we go. In part A, this anonymous ape scholar starts off on the right track, establishing low levels of precipitation and high temperatures as their two climate factors. And they're correct that low precipitation reduces tree growth, and that without tree roots to limit soil erosion, formation of soil might be slower. However, this point isn't on the rubric, and I think it's because it's somewhat indirect. The more direct answer is that limited tree survival would limit biological weathering caused by the roots of the trees. So this idea of the loss of soil from erosion is really more directly the result of either high precipitation or wind activity. And since they didn't really expand at all on high temperatures, they didn't earn that point either. In part B, however, they picked up both points by identifying the roots of plants as a biotic component and water as an abiotic component that would both be found in the A horizon. In part C, they picked up another set of points. First, by identifying using excess levels of nitrate-based fertilizers as a practice that can lead to elevated nitrate levels in groundwater. And second, by describing how those excess fertilizers can percolate through permeable soil in order to reach the groundwater. Now in part D, the scholar's on the right track in describing the reduction of soil fertility due to nutrient leaching, but they incorrectly identified phosphate ions, which are negatively charged, as being replaced by positively charged H+ ions. Now I actually had to do a little research here to understand the exact mechanism at play, but it turns out that soil acidification still can reduce phosphate availability, but it's due to the increased solubility of aluminum and iron, which bind with phosphate, not the displacement of phosphate ions from anion binding sites by hydrogen ions. Now in D part 2, this scholar wasn't quite sure about a method for remediating soil affected by acid deposition. But if we think back to chemistry class, hopefully we can remember that adding a base to an acid neutralizes it, and what better base to add than crushed up limestone. Finally, in part E, this scholar was again super close to earning a point by stating that higher temperature and decreased level of rainfall will cause soils that were once fertile with enough moisture to deteriorate. They're flirting with the desertification point, but ultimately I didn't feel like they were quite there. It feels like there's just a little too much left to be assumed from their answer. If they specified how this can lead to increased soil erosion or decreased permeability over time as soils lose organic matter, I'd have felt better about awarding this point. If we check out a student sample who did earn this point in part E, we can see how they clearly stated a change from a tropic with lots of rain into a desert, and even clarified that soil would become dry and erode away. Ultimately, this is just a clearer answer because there's an actual mechanism of soil degradation. So this anonymous ape scholar ended up with a 4 out of 10, which is a completely respectable FRQ score, especially when you consider the fact that back in 2016, the global average for this FRQ was just 2.8 out of 10. In fact, students who earned a 3 on last year's 2022 exam averaged just 3.2 out of 10 points across all their FRQs. So if you can pull off a 4 on each of yours this year, you're gonna have a pretty good shot at earning a passing exam score. Now that we've scored practice FRQ number 4, let's take a look ahead at our next FRQ Friday prompt. Our practice FRQ for Unit 5 comes to us from the 2015 exam and covers the topic of urban sprawl, which, in addition to being an ecologically problematic result of the expansion of the highway system, the gasoline tax, human population growth, also happens to be the title of a banger from Arcade Fire's 2010 Grammy-winning album, The Suburbs. Alright, sorry, back to FRQ writing. So in letter A on this question, we start off with a describe question, so let's circle that and write a 2 above it. And what we're describing are 2 causes of urban sprawl. So remember, our answers have to be actual causes that result in urban sprawl. Now in letter B, we have a discuss prompt. And remember that discuss is an outdated task verb that functions similar to explain, so we can write a 3 next to that and just treat this as an explain. In this case, we need to explain 2 human health effects associated with urban sprawl. So I'm going to underline 2 human health effects because our core answer needs to be human health effects, but they need to be associated with or happen as a result of urban sprawl. Now in part C, we have a graph that we need to look at, and this graph is showing us the relationship between population density and petroleum use in selected cities. We have a describe prompt, so we need to circle that and write a 2 next to it. And what we're describing is a relationship. So I want to make sure to underline that word relationship because our answer must be a relationship about how population density and petroleum use, as shown in the graph, are related. Now in letter D, we're looking at smart growth or ways to have more sustainable development and reduce some of these effects of urban sprawl. So we have a describe prompt, which we'll circle and write a 2 above. And what we're describing are 2 steps that a municipality or a city could take. So I'm underlining that. Our core answer has to be steps taken by a city or municipality. And these steps should encourage smart growth, ultimately with the goal of limiting urban sprawl. So one more time, I want to make it crystal clear here. These have to be steps or actions that a city could actually take. So think about things that cities can do to encourage smart growth and to limit urban sprawl. And for each step, make sure you support it with a second layer of detail since this is a describe prompt. Now in letter E, we're going to take a look at methods to reduce the harmful effects on wildlife populations from highways and urban sprawl. So we'll circle our describe task verb, write a 2 next to it. And here we're looking for methods that are going to reduce those harmful effects. Specifically, those harmful effects are happening to wildlife populations and their effects that happen to those populations because of highways and urban sprawl. And finally, in letter F, we're asked to describe a practical way to increase food production, specifically in urban areas. Now that we've annotated our 5th FRQ Friday practice FRQ, we are officially over halfway through the FRQ Friday series for 2023. And I just can't say enough about the importance of being able to write quality FRQ answers under the time setting of that exam in May. If you're not practicing FRQs with a 23-minute timer on and your full undivided attention lasered in on that prompt, you're in for a rude awakening when it comes time for the exam in May. But if you're still watching this far into the video, let's be honest, you're probably the rare APE student who's actually practicing writing like a scholar months before the exam rolls around, which is good news because that means you're not only building the skills that you need on the exam in May, but also reviewing the content from previous units. So keep up the great work and maybe even consider sharing this video with an APE scholar who is not thinking like a mountain right now and needs to get started studying for that exam. And remember that if you want your practice FRQ scored in our next FRQ Friday video, make sure to email or snail mail it to me. And whether or not your FRQ gets selected for the next FRQ Friday video, thanks for watching, and as always, think like a mountain and write like a scholar.